The Paul Leslie Interviews.
A big Buffett welcome to Mr. Peter Buffett. How you doing, Peter?
All right.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, your style of music is heavily influenced by Native American music. So how did you get the passion for Native American music?
Well, it started by reading a book, actually. I read a book in the late 80s called Son of the Morning Star, and it was about the history of the North American Indian nations in the 19th century, which most of us now know wasn't such great history at all. And it was something I never learned. And I was kind of amazed at what I hadn't learned and what people weren't teaching in school. And I wondered where Indian people were. I mean, I didn't know anything about them. I didn't know, usually we see them in history books or museums, or if at all. And I just felt like, boy, here are people that have been here for thousands of years. And it sounds like it'd be important to learn more about who they are and how they live, and we might be able to learn a lot. And I started to write some music, kind of just based on feelings about that. And Kevin Costner heard that music and asked me to contribute to Dances with Wolves. I wrote one piece of music in that film, 2 minutes of music, and that sort of launched my whole career in a different direction, and interest deepened, and went on to score 8 hours of a series called 500 Nations that Kevin produced, and just kept getting deeper and more interesting, and now here I am a lot of years later still doing it.
And the song you mentioned from Dances with Wolves, that's Fire Dance, right?
Yeah, right. It's interesting because, when you're working on a project like that, it's first and foremost a job. You get hired and you're excited to do it, and you don't really know how the movie's going to turn out, if it's going to be popular. You just do the work. And for that, because I only was scoring one scene, I wasn't even sure how that scene really fit into the movie. So you can imagine my surprise and delight when not only the movie did very well, but the scene was the scene where Kevin dances around the fire, and essentially is the transformative scene for him in the movie. So, it's considered a pivotal scene, and that was also very exciting to not only be in a movie that ended up doing so well, but to have a scene in that movie that pretty much everybody remembers. It was pretty exciting.
One of the things about that movie is it's just it's such a wonderful story. When you first read this, or when you read the script, or when you became acquainted with the storyline, what was your first thought about Dances with Wolves?
Well, I, along with I think anybody who was associated with it, knew it was going to be different. Knew it was going to tell the story from a different angle and have a different feeling of integration, I guess, of the true story of what it must have been like on the plains at that time. And a lot of people thought Costner was crazy for doing it, because here was a movie that was 3 hours long. A lot of it was subtitled because it was done in the original language, or the correct language, of the Sioux, the Dakota Sioux, I believe. And Kevin had never directed, so it was just, a lot of people really thought it was just a crazy idea all around. But regardless of whether, what you thought of the idea, everybody knew it was going to be different, and it was going to approach the whole subject matter from a more realistic and appropriate angle. And so I think from that perspective, again, whether you thought it was a good or a bad idea, it was going to be different and tell the story in a compelling way.
I was listening to your album, it's a compilation of them, the songs from an East Side Attic.
Yeah, there's a different take on everything.
Yeah, and there was lots of songs on there that were really like nothing I'd ever heard before. And you doing a lot of Native American style music. I noticed that you were in into some other styles as well.
Right. Yeah, I sort of have a like parallel tracks that never, I don't think, really meet, or I don't know, maybe they do somewhere, but I definitely, before I was involved with the movie and with 500 Nations and the Spirit Show and all the things I've done along that track of Native American influence music, I had been doing for many, many years lots of other kinds of music, and music for commercials, and some things that are more, you would consider more pop or quirkier sounding things. And so that track is still very much alive as well. It's kind of it's tricky for me because people sort of know me in one world or the other, and I never know which one is actually, going to be my career path ultimately. So I just kind of follow one and keep the other one going, and who knows where I'll end up.
One of the tracks on there is Touch the Clouds, which is a really cool song. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that song?
Yeah, that actually, I had done some vocal work with a woman for a commercial, and I wish I could remember what commercial, so quite a while ago. And of course, when you're recording anything these days, especially, everything's on a separate track. And later on, I was asked to score a documentary film about how to prepare for a triathlon, the story of triathletes, and that sort of thing. And I had remembered this vocal. I'd already written this piece of music, and so I pulled this vocal in from another piece and put it in there and changed a few things around with phrasing and stuff. That's the beauty of computers and music these days. You can put in about anything in any other piece. So it was really a marriage of something I had in the studio, this vocal from this commercial from somewhere, and then this piece of music I'd written specifically for the film. And when they came together, it was magic. Much like actually on that same CD, the song Sugar Baby, which is a very kind of funny, quirky song. That's a piece of music I wrote completely, and then I was searching for kind of the final piece to the puzzle and came across this old recording of Doc Boggs singing Sugar Baby from, I couldn't tell you what year, 1920 something. It's an old recording, and I put it in the song, and it was a match made in heaven.
You never hear Native American music, or you normally don't hear Native American music on the radio, which is part of the reason we're doing this show today. So what are you trying to accomplish? What do you hope people get out of your music?
Well, I hope it does kind of instill an interest in the culture and a curiosity, and they might delve a little more deeply into that, and also it might just kind of broaden their thinking about what music can be, because radio is so limited in so many ways across the dial. It's great that you're able to expose people to music they probably don't hear anywhere else on the radio, and so the music is another version of that. If you can get people to hear what I'm doing, or other Native music, or any kind of music, that kind of piques people's interest and says, boy, what else is out there that I don't know or I haven't heard, and I think that's what radio used to be. In the 60s, you'd hear all sorts of things, and it would get you excited, and you'd want to get into something new and explore some new avenue of sound or culture, and hopefully my music can do the same thing.
I was listening to the song Ashland from Lost Frontiers, and I was wondering, was that inspired by Ashland, Maine?
Actually, Ashland, Nebraska.
Oh, okay.
That's because I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and so actually it was one that was closer to home. Although I think there's probably Ashlands in just about every state, probably, so you can write your own version into it.
Speaking of Nebraska, some of the listeners might not know that your father is Warren Buffett, and he's a ukulele plucker. Was he an encouragement with music, or how did he feel about you being a musician?
I love having him described as a ukulele player. So, and he would too. He was, both my parents were, they were both highly supportive of seeking out anything to do for a living that you loved. It was very much encouraged to, pursue a passion, basically, and in that way, certainly generally, he was supportive. And then specifically, there was always some form of music around the house. That mostly actually came through my mother, who was a singer and would always bring home, interesting new music, and was really into mostly really pop culture music of the 60s, specifically when I was young. I had an older sister that would bring home the rock music, and she would bring home the soul and the R&B stuff. My mom would. So it was a great eclectic combination with my mom, with my dad throwing in the ukulele and the Glenn Miller and the other quirky elements that like Spike Jones that he grew up with when he was young. So the music was definitely around the house, and both my parents really encouraged pursuing either music or whatever else might be, really a passion.
I was reading the liner notes, and there was some Walt Whitman inspiration there.
Yes.
And I guess as an English major, whenever I hear about literary influences, I always have to ask about that.
Yeah, I was searching, really, and you can see the development of it, actually. On Lost Frontier, I had a little bit of choir on one song, Searching for a Place Called Home. And I really liked using choir, and you can see kind of the ultimate version of that is in the Spirit Show, where there's quite a bit of choir. And Genadio was in the middle there, where I was kind of taking the next leap, and I was looking for words for the choir to sing, because I hadn't yet kind of decided what I was going to do. And I went through, somebody had recommended Walt Whitman, and actually Genadio was a poem that he wrote, and I think it's Iroquois that somehow is translated into Lament for the Native People. And I actually went through and kind of pulled different lines from Whitman from actually different poems, some from that one, and then also, co-opted kind of my own things in there as well, and came up with the words that the choir sing. So it's kind of a combination of some of his words and some of my own, and it worked out.
When you're not making music or doing musical related business work, what do you like to do as your hobbies?
I thought you were just going to say, what do you do? And I was going to say, sleep. The only other thing I do, aside from music or music-related things, it's funny because, when your hobby is also your livelihood, it's tricky, to actually take a break sometimes and not do it. And I certainly am involved in other Native-related things. I help out in terms of foundations or certain projects that are happening around the country, if I can, in some ways, bringing my take on art and the culture and how it can either get kids involved in things or just help just help in ways with the culture and the artistry of it. But really, it's about all I do. It's a little bit of a problem.
I bet it's kind of it's kind of a pain sometimes to have the last name Buffett. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean,
no, I know what you mean. Yeah.
You know what I'm going to ask? I'm going to ask how many people go up to you and say, "Are you related to Jimmy Buffett?"
A whole lot of them. In fact, actually, I should say it used to be a whole lot, and that was the only thing I got. Now it's sort of half and half. A lot of times they'll say, "Are you related to Jimmy or Warren?" Because my dad has a much higher profile now than he did 10 or 20 years ago, and it's very funny. I just had to go up to Canada to do some work on the DVD of the show. And sure enough, you hit customs and they look at the name and they ask that question. It's just the funniest thing. And Jimmy, he's a wonderful guy, and it's kind of fun because we're both into music, so at least there's a relationship there, even though from a blood relation, and I don't know how many generations it goes back. I'm sure Doris told you. It's quite a ways, and she's done all the research. But my dad now has this high profile, and that's been interesting because when you're out for the show, the spirit show took a lot of money to get off the ground. I had to go out and raise money over the last many years, and of course everybody thought that was crazy because they just figured I could just go to my dad and ask him to write a check, and he doesn't do that sort of thing.
This program goes out all over the world. So my question to you, Mr. Peter Buffett, is what would you like to say to the world?
Well, I think I would like to say to the world that we should all, because of my interest in Native people, we should listen to the indigenous people all over the world because they have a lot to tell us. And I think as we get into, people worrying about climate change or worrying about what's going on in Africa or what's going on, with the things that happened with the tsunami, all of the things that happen around the world, it's usually the indigenous people that know first how to potentially solve the problem or know the problem is coming or deal with it in a way that a lot of times the rest of us don't think those ways. And so I would say that we should really be listening to the indigenous voices around the world because I think they're gonna save us ultimately. I think it's an important message.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. Great to be here.